Hello, everyone. My name is Marnie Edelhart, and I'm the VP of Content with Momentum Events. It is my great pleasure to welcome you here for today's webinar. Before I turn things over to our presenters, just a few words of note. This session is being recorded. Everyone registered will automatically receive an email from us containing a link to the recording that you can review. You'll get that in the next day or so. The presenters have also agreed to make their slides available, and we'll share that with you in our follow-up email as well. Finally, the presenters will be conducting a Q&A at the conclusion of their formal presentation. Please use the Q&A pane at the bottom of your screen to pose questions to the panelists. With that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Kurt Hawks and Karen Burka to lead your webinar today. Karen, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Marnie, and welcome everyone. We're really excited to share with you what we know today about identity resolution, in particular about how to use it to personalize your marketing and media efforts to make them more effective and relevant for your audiences, and also how to comply with the many tangled web of privacy regulations that we're seeing more and more of. So we hope we're able to offer some help to all of you today, regardless of where you are, whether you're a beginner with identity resolution, whether you know enough to be dangerous. We're hoping we'll have some information today to help you. So we're going to get started. I'm going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning of the webinar going over things like defining identity resolution, talking about some basics in terms of what's happening in the market. Why is identity resolution becoming more important for marketers such as yourselves? And then we're going to get much more into the nuts and bolts with Kurt in terms of use cases and how identity resolution fits within your MarTech stack and your ad tech stack. So we have a lot to get through today, and we're looking forward to it. So what we're going to do.
Hi, everybody. Kurt Hawks, Chief Revenue Officer at FullContact. I've spent about 25 years at the intersection of corporate strategy and marketing technology, just driving growth at public and private companies. Excited to be here and talk more about identity resolution.
Sorry, Kirk, I should have
it's all right.
To do that before I started pressing the buttons up and down. All right, good. So we're going to start off at the beginning with what is identity resolution. And I've got a couple of definitions for all of you. And the point in showing different definitions is that identity resolution can be a little different to different researchers, different platforms, but there are certain things that are in common. And those are important elements that we want to keep an eye on in terms of what's common across identity resolution, any definition you see. Okay, so let's look at this first definition, which is from a research firm called the Winterberry Group. And it says the coordinated activation of platforms, data, and support. Move this over a little bit. And supporting services, both provided by third parties and sourced from among marketers' in-house resources that support persistent recognition of audience members across devices and other promotional and transactional touch points. So you'll see, audience, that the highlighted words are persistent recognition. So identity follows a consumer across platforms, no matter where they are, no matter what device they're using, and it recognizes them. So you can take anonymous user and it enables you to recognize who that person is so that you can market more effectively to them. Let's look at this definition as well. Software that integrates consumer identifiers across channels and devices in a way that is accurate, scalable, and privacy compliant to create a persistent, so there's that word again, and addressable individual profile. So once again, this definition is from Third Door Media's MarTech Today website and a report on identity resolution called Enterprise Identity Resolution Platforms and Marketers Guide, which I actually authored and why I was asked to speak on this webinar today. So I wanted to share this definition with you. And again, we see that the common elements are across channels and devices in a way that is persistent, an ID that attaches to a consumer no matter where they go, whether they're on their smartphone, whether they're on a website, whether they're in the store using their loyalty card. And it makes them addressable for you as a marketer so that you can reach out with what you know about them in a way that makes sense and is relevant to them. So the question is then, what does identity resolution do? Right? And it provides several table stakes capabilities that revolve around four main prongs. And you'll see what I'm talking about in the next slide. Data onboarding, matching online, offline data, activating data, and privacy regulation compliance. And together, these capabilities enable brands such as yourselves to create a data-rich customer profile that can be activated through your MarTech and AdTech systems. So let's see what that looks like. So at the center of identity resolution, and why it's in the title of our webinar today, is compliance with data privacy regulations. And what connects the capabilities and why we have put it in the title of the webinar is that the expansion of data privacy regulations is making data governance and customer preference management really critical capabilities for today's marketers. I want to give you an example. So in California, the state is already on the second iteration of its consumer data privacy law, which is now called the California Privacy Rights Act. The first iteration of this regulation was called the California Consumer Privacy Act, and they've tightened it up even further in the last 2 years. Now, we've all heard in plenty of places in the news that Google, Firefox, and Safari, the browser companies, are all eliminating access to third-party cookie data. And instead, Google and Facebook are creating what we're calling walled gardens, and where the data from their sites are put in a safe box. And as a marketer, even if you're an advertiser, and these are people who've clicked on your ads, you can't get at their information. You have to work with it and analyze the data within the walled garden. So they're making it very difficult for advertisers and marketers to get their own data about their own users. It's all completely anonymized and you can manipulate it, but you can't take it with you. So these are all the challenges that are facing marketers in terms of data privacy regulations. So not only is it important for you to comply with these regulations legally, but ethically, the stewardship of customer data makes good business sense and it builds customer trust in the brand. So let's start looking more specifically at the pieces of this wheel. So I'm going to start with data onboarding on top. And that's where first-party customer data is entered into an identity graph. And data is typically onboarded via a secure file transfer protocol, your direct API download, or pixel syncs. And specifically, the goal of this first step is to match online and offline identifiers, maybe suppress unresolved IDs, hash PII, which is personally identifiable information for anybody who, I know sometimes the acronyms get to all of us a little bit. You can hash your PII with anonymous IDs, you can validate your match accuracy, and link matched IDs to the universal ID that's going to be associated with your individual profile. Now, the proprietary identity graph, any identity resolution platform or provider is going to have a proprietary graph or database that houses all of the known identifiers that can be linked to an individual. Now, this can include demographics, behavioral data, financial data, lifestyle data, transactional data, any kind of third-party compiled or publicly available data, as well as second-party data sources that have contributed their first-party data to cooperative or shared graph. And that's a case where you've got marketers or brands that anonymize their data and agree to share it with each other and for limited use by a certain number of companies. That's a second-party graph. And what happens is you onboard your data into the graph and it connects all the pieces or signals of data that are known and can be attached to the individual. And it creates this persistent universal ID that allows you then to create a more robust customer profile with everything we then know about that particular individual or even a household. Third, and most importantly, is the persistent ID, which I just alluded to. And that follows the individual as identifiers change. So when browser cookies expire, they're deleted by customers, when somebody buys a new device, when they're using a new loyalty card in the store, et cetera. So once you've created these rich IDs and customer profiles, the question is, how do you activate it? And that's the fourth prong there, which is your APIs for system integration. And that's how you integrate the ID into your MarTech and AdTech ecosystem. We're going to talk about that now here on this slide. So again, we're using these prongs where the persistent ID is in the middle. And this is how you connect to your marketing and advertising ecosystem. So at a minimum, identity resolution supports and enables data activation by plugging into a variety of your internal MarTech stack. So that can include your customer relationship management platform, your data management platforms. So you see those on top, CRMs, DMPs. You've got your marketing automation platforms for all your email campaigns. There's also, you want to use your APIs and plug your persistent ID into your external ad tech platforms, your demand side platforms, your trading desks, your ad exchanges. You can plug it into a cooperative ID graph, which I just mentioned before, these second party IDs, where there's a select group of marketers that maybe you want to share some anonymous data with because you have some commonalities in terms of the types of audiences you're looking for. So that's important as well. APIs can be very specific. You can have an API for personally identifiable information. You can have an email API. You can have a device API. You can have a household API. Some identity resolution brands will also use plug and play connections to facilitate activation of your data right into your marketing and media campaigns and tools, maybe like a dashboard tool, like a Tableau or visualization tools. So there's all kinds of ways to plug in the ID into different kinds of MarTech and ad tech tools. So identity resolution makes important connections with all of these systems. Just a little bit, very sensitive screen. Sorry, folks. So what I'm going to do at this point is I want to bring my co-presenter, Kurt Hawks, in. Kurt, why don't you explain for the audience a little bit more how identity resolution sort of differs from all these tools? I went over it really quickly, but I think it's important for them to understand how it fits in to the whole MarTech stack and how it's different and not different from any of these platforms.
Right, absolutely. You talked about the notion of a persistent identifier and how identity resolution can provide that persistent identifier and the connection to different elements in the marketing technology stack. What often comes up is, how is it different than a CRM system or CDP or DMP? And the way I think about it is, CRM, CDP, DMP, it's basically there's storage engines or places to store known information. So let me give you an example. If I provide a brand or marketing technology company, if I give them my name and address and give them my email address, they know those different identifiers are linked to me. Those can be stored in a CDP, right? But what if I sign up for an email newsletter using a different email that I have not declared is connected to me? What happens is the storage layers don't really know that. They know what the brand knows or marketing technology provider knows and store that information for use in some other way. What identity resolution does, it takes the declared and undeclared or known and unknown identifiers, maps and resolves those to a persistent ID that can be common across the enterprise. So identity resolution can and should be connected into a CRM and a CDP and a DMP. Furthermore, if we look at the far right, the delivery and orchestration platform, those tend to be kind of channel-based rules engines. I almost think about them like that. So think about an email delivery platform, where as a brand, I can say, hey, I want to take these 100 emails and I want to send this message to these 100 emails at this time and this date. But what it doesn't do, right, is it doesn't make that connection of the unknown or undeclared. So if I have an email that I've provided linked to Kurt Hawks, and I have another email that I've just signed up for the email newsletter, the email delivery platform thinks I'm two people, right? So I'm going to get two messages or perhaps two different messages that might or might not relate to me. Even something like a website personalization platform, it's really about orchestration. If I'm a customer, present this content. If I'm a prospect, present that content. So again, that's keyed off of what is already known, and identity resolution can provide incremental identification that is unknown, right? That has not been linked. So the delivery and orchestration layer can be more powerful. The personalization can be more relevant. The selection of emails to send can be more relevant. Okay, next slide.
Yep.
And this often comes up as well. So how's identity resolution different than something like data cleansing or NCOA, or isn't just deduplication? And identity resolution, the core of it is meant to resolve or map identities that people use to represent themselves at different times in different places, right? So whether it's visiting a website, I might sign in, not sign in, engaging with a mobile application, I might sign in or might not sign into a mobile application, calling a call center, engaging in a social platform, all those different identifiers or breadcrumbs that I leave as a consumer. Identity resolution is meant to unify all that information. If you think about NCOA or data cleansing, it's really about cleaning up a particular channel-based identifier, right? So name and address. Or deduplication, it's, hey, Kurt HAWKS and Kurt HAWKES are in there. We think they're the same person. So again, based on rules, where identity resolution is really about unifying in real time the seeds and breadcrumbs that a consumer leaves as they interact with a brand or technology provider or publisher.
Great. Thanks, Kurt. That's a great way to look at it, and I think it's really helpful for the audience. So audience, here we are telling you what this does and why it's important. So now the question is, why should you care? You're out here. We know you do care a little bit because you signed up for the webinar. And the crux of what we want to get across here is that identity resolution is one of the only ways right now that you can enhance the value of your first party data. And as I've mentioned briefly, and we're going to talk about this more, third-party cookies are disappearing. So it's making it much more important that the data you have, the data you know about your customers, your prospects, and as Kurt said, but they're breadcrumbs. They're all over the place, and you're not sure, is this person the same person as this person? Or is the person who logged in here and bought this on my website the same person who's now on their website or their cell phone? These are the reasons why you have to care, because this is the data that's going to become more and more important for you and your brand. And if you're not doing it, I can tell you that your competitors are doing it. So what I want to do is look at a little bit of information to sort of back up what I'm saying there. So with third-party cookies disappearing, that's going to take a huge toll on your access to visitor data. Now, this is a survey from the IAB, the Internet Advertising Bureau, and the Winterberry Group. And basically, they asked marketers, so with Google and other browser companies discontinuing their support of third-party cookies, what are you going to do in terms of your data? And the top answer, more than 60% of marketers said they're going to increase their spending and their emphasis on the use of their first-party data. Now, to do that and be effective with that, your data has to be accurate, and you have to have robust data. You can't just have one piece of information, an email address. You have to know everything you know about that particular person or household. The second two responses here were also interesting. So 38% of respondents said it's going to increase their interest in third-party identity resolution solutions, because as we've been saying so far, that's the way you pull all those signals or those breadcrumbs together to figure out who is that person and how many of these breadcrumbs are relating to person A or how many are actually person B. And then I wanted to mention the third choice here, the 36% that responded, they're going to increase their efforts to build second-party data relationships, because I've mentioned that a couple of times now, that select marketers can anonymize their data, go into an identity graph together, and share the data you have about your different audiences to sort of fill in those gaps and plug in the holes and connect those breadcrumbs. So that's number one, why it's important. I also wanted to take a look at a couple of slides from Forrester Research. Now, a lot of us are very familiar with Forrester and their various quadrants of different kinds of technologies. This is from the Forrester Tech Tide Ad Tech graph that they have. And I wanted to show this to you because already Forrester is showing us that identity resolution is a high value application. And it's in their quadrant for high business value in low maturity, which means it's still growing. And you can see there, it's an invest recommendation only with identity resolution and video advertising platforms. So this is important to know that identity resolution is an invest in technology and is ripened to the point where you can confidently invest in the platforms and tools that are available to help you resolve identities. You're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. There's a second graph here from the same report about data onboarding. And I thought that was important to bring up because, as I mentioned, data onboarding is a key capability in terms of identity resolution. You've got to put your data into the graph, right? And as Kurt mentioned, you want your data to be standardized and accurate and deduped, et cetera, because it's important then, because then you're putting in good data and you're going to get back, really robust data. So Forrester calls this a maintained technology, meaning it's table stakes that you really need to rely on your business to get your data to be useful for you. And Forrester does recommend that enterprises maintain their installation and use of data onboarding technologies. So we've seen that that's a key aspect of identity resolution. And the one other thing, I'm an analyst, so I like to present a lot of charts and graphs, is where's the money? Right? So spending is going up. And right now, this is also from the IAB and the Winterberry Group. And they're projecting that identity services, platforms, and data is going to be an over $8 billion market by 2024. Now, the market is growing, by, it says here, almost 20% compound annual growth rate. So all of the factors we've talked about so far in terms of having to be more relevant, losing access to third-party data, the inefficiency of mass marketing, consumers using more channels than ever before. You have to be able to follow them across all their channels and devices, and also their expectations for the brand experience are higher than ever. So companies are out there, they're spending more on identity services, and it's important that you not be left behind. So I'm going to just very briefly talk a little bit about the crowded identity market, and then Kurt's going to tell you some more as well. So where are the dollars going, and what are your choices when it comes to an identity resolution platform or provider or partner? So the largest players in the space include 3 publicly held companies that we've probably all done business with, companies like Experian, LiveRamp, and Oracle. There's also a group of large media companies owned by the global holding agencies or private equity firms, and we include companies like Axiom, Neustar, and Merkle in that group. And then we've got a whole group of privately held pure play identity resolution providers, which include FullContact, which is Kirk's company, as well as a group of other companies, including Infudor, Signal, Smarter HQ, and Throttle. So there's lots of different choices when it comes to who is the right fit for your company in terms of moving forward in your identity resolution efforts. So what I'm going to do is ask Kurt to tell us some more at this point in terms of what should marketers look for when considering an identity resolution partner or provider, Kurt.
So there are a lot of nuances with identity resolution providers, and what we try to do is summarize some of the requirements, what to look for in terms of 5 key points, and I'll talk about those in the context of a consumer journey. So Karen, you mentioned a number of these things already, but if we think about identity resolution, just think about what happens. The relationships are built on recognizing somebody over time. Think about if we were in a conversation and I were to meet you and say, "Hi, I'm Kurt Hawks." 3 minutes later, I act like I'd never met you. "Hi, I'm Kurt Hawks." 2 minutes later, "Hi, I'm Kurt Hawks." You'd back up. You'd say, "What's wrong with this guy? Why is he doing that?" Yet what happens? Think about our own interactions with brands over time, publishers over time. That happens again and again and again. And why does it happen? It happens because identity resolution capabilities are not there, right? When I choose to interact with the brand on a different channel or different time, that brand or technology provider doesn't recognize me, so treats me like they've met me for the first time. So it's really about understanding the person behind the device, behind the identifier, across channels. So omni-channel, the notion of the consumer journey has changed, right? You've heard the funnel's dead, whatever you want to talk about. The reality is there's more and more consumer touch points over time, and more channels by which a consumer can interact with a brand or publisher or technology provider. So that person-based omni-channel view is critical. Karen, you talked a number of times about the persistency. The persistency is absolutely critical. It's persistent over time, persistent across channels, persistent across internal systems, right? And that exactly is the point around portable across platforms, whether that platform is an internal system or an external system. That person-based omni-channel and persistent identifiers should be portable across platforms. In real time, we as consumers operate in real time. The moment we choose to interact with a brand or publisher or technology provider, we want to get the information that we want. So there's been study upon study done around, personalization. There's been study upon study done around impact of consumer experience, how that drives loyalty, how that drives retention, increased lifetime value. There's a negative side of it as well, where if you don't get it right, guess what? You're going to create a bad consumer experience, and that is costly. So if we think about the consumer journey, just represented in a quite simple way on the right-hand side. So think about, Jesse Lee or whomever might receive a catalog mailed to them, obviously via their home address or their business address. They might receive some kind of an email that they opt in. They might call the call center. They might, in California, might submit a subject access request. So Jesse12@gmail.com says, "What do you know about me?" All these are breadcrumbs or identities that are provided over time. And imagine what you can do is the minute in which this identifier is presented to you as a brand, technology provider, publisher, what have you, that instant recognition of Jesse Lee occurs so that you can provide the most meaningful and relevant experience over time. That's really what's driving this interest in identity resolution. Next slide. So we're all familiar with this. If you think about the expanding communication and engagement channels, the customer journey is very complicated. It's very complicated because I might start to investigate or read about purchasing something on my mobile device. I might jump to my desktop device. I might jump to another mobile device, my tablet, and at night I might call the call center from my mobile phone or from my work phone or my business phone. So the expanding communication channels have made things a lot more complicated. Think about that in the context of consumer expectations. Everything is just a click away. Everything is just, immediately at our fingertips as consumers, and we expect that information. So if I'm a long-standing, very loyal member, I know, bought from brand X a lot, don't treat me like you never met me before. So the expectations around personalized experience is really there. And if we think about the shift over time, the amount of kind of IT related and technology related investments that have shifted into the CMO's camp, right, has created an increasing amount of pressure to make sure that there's a return on marketing spend, right? Return on investment for marketing initiatives. And it's very tough to really quantify that return on marketing spend if it's done on a channel-based siloed perspective. Now, also think about it from the consumer side, right? Increasing expectations around privacy, increasing expectations around appropriate use of data, increasing expectations, not just from the consumer side, but from the legislative side as well. So all of these things, all these challenges have created what we think about as an identity mandate. Without identity resolution, I don't believe you can solve these challenges, or actually solve them in a meaningful way. Next slide. So if we think about the challenges that we've just talked about, we think about how fast the space continues to move, right? What I like to think about is, future-proofing your customer relationships. I think that, this notion of owning the customer experience is increasingly important. This notion of being able to have first-party data that you can leverage and build on top of to create competitive advantage, that's real, right? Both those things are real. And if we think about what's happening, right, rapid amount of technology changes, the demise of the third-party cookie, Apple making changes with regards to mobile advertising IDs, the legislative environment, right? There are, CCPA, California, there's GDPR. In Europe, there's, more local legislation that is likely to come. Think about technology changes, legislation, and the rise of consumer expectations. So What happens is identity resolution can help you, future-proof those customer relationships by creating a consistent identifier, a consistent set of information that's linked to real verified consumers, and doing it in a way that is encrypted and protected, right? To make sure that you're future-proofing both from I'll call it a positive side of creating the best consumer experience and managing against the downside risk of, letting any information out there. If it's encrypted, secure, obfuscated, but provides a way to link identifiers together in real time, it's really a great step forward in terms of future-proofing those customer relationships. Next slide, please. Karen talked about this in terms of one of the earlier slides where there was kind of the persistent identity in the middle. I talked about it a little bit in terms of how is identity resolution different than a CDP or CRM. And what I think is really critical is when thinking about how to leverage identity resolution, I don't believe it's about throwing out investments that have made in the existing marketing technology stack. I really think about it as identity resolution can amplify the existing marketing technology investments. How do you make it better, right? So if you think about something like a CRM system, and I gave the example, I might have the declared information, Kurt Hawk's linked to email 123. I might have another email that I provided for some kind of a newsletter or some kind of a promotion. So the CRM system stores all that. Identity resolution can improve the capabilities of a CRM system by saying, hey, this other email that was hanging out there actually belongs to Kurt Hawk's. So whether it's connecting and providing a persistent identity layer within the enterprise at the point of which consumers choose to engage, right? Website, call center, mobile application, whether it's extending outside of the enterprise, like executing a digital advertising campaign via demand side platform or sending an email or mobile app, the persistent identity layer really provides a portable, omnichannel, and persistent view of consumers across the marketing technology ecosystem to amplify those investments. Next slide, please. So this is often something that comes up, right? Where get in a conversation and it's the conversation goes to, okay, so what can I expect from implementing some identity resolution set of capabilities? What are the benefits to me? And there's kind of I'll call them I don't want to call them soft benefits, but non-quantified benefits. Talk around, hey, better ability to improve your data management, driving better customer and prospect engagement, increased lifetime value, making investments more accountable. That's all well and good. But what we've done here on the left-hand side is we looked across our customer base and really quantified the impact that we're driving for our customers in terms of hard numbers. So if we think about in the information that a brand or technology provider has on a customer, it's really siloed across different channels. Might have some information email stored in the email platform, might have some transaction information and built to and shipped to stored in a CRM system, might have some mobile advertising IDs or stored in one platform, call center information stored in another platform. So the ability to take all those different identifiers and link and unify those to customers, what we're seeing is about a 40% increase in linkage and unification. So instead of saying, I think I have 10 million customers or 10 million customer records, well, it's actually, 6 million customers because these other emails or identifiers were hanging out, not linked to the right customers. If we think about different touch points, so if you think about anybody who has a website, think about the percent of those website visitors that log in, and not everybody logs in. In fact, more people probably visit the website anonymously than log in. So with those anonymous visitors, we can provide a 32% increase in recognition of anonymous visitors and tying those anonymous visitors to the customer file, to the CRM file. And if we think about the persistency in visiting a website, persistency of an identifier or a cookie around the same person across different devices and different sessions, what we are realizing for our customers is a 20% increase in persistency of identification of the same person across different devices on website visits. Think about the impact of all of these things, right? Better resolution of customer identifiers to real people, better recognition of anonymous website visitors and more persistency of that recognition, to be able to provide the tailored experiences and treat a customer like a customer or a prospect like a prospect, we're seeing it drive about a 13% increase in website conversion from those recognized people. All of this, provides an improvement in measurement and accuracy, right? So back to that, I'm trying to implement identity resolution or trying to implement website personalization or trying to implement whatever, providing that portable, persistent omni-channel view provides a much better way to measure the effectiveness of marketing investments. Next slide. Okay, Karen, I'll turn it back to you to talk a little bit, to frame up a little bit of discussion around use cases.
Yep, no, that was great, Kurt. So audience, Kurt has given you some of these benefits of all the different ways that you can see an improvement in your marketing and your customer engagement. So what are the actual use cases? So Kurt is going to get into some more specifics, but basically identity resolution can support and amplify marketing and media processes around audience targeting, measurement, and personalization for known and anonymous audiences across channels. And I know that you're probably sick of hearing us say this, but it's really important to be able to connect known and anonymous audiences, because as Kurt showed you earlier in one of the slides, I mean, not every piece of your MarTech stack is going to do this. You've got things like CRMs and CDPs, and they're good at either anonymous users or good at known users. But identity resolution is going to help you pull that all together and make your marketing and media more effective. So as Kurt said, I wanted to just sort of lay that out there of, in general, these are the kinds of things you can use identity resolution for. And Kurt's going to talk more specifically about some use cases here.
Yeah, so FullContact works with a variety of different types of companies, ranging from brands and e-commerce providers to publishers, to data companies, ad tech, martech companies. What I'll try to do is highlight a couple of the specific use cases that we're working with our customers in. And if we think about starting from the brand side, we talked about this persistent identification layer across the ecosystem to really provide that enterprise view of consumers to enable better customer experiences and better measurement. That's a key aspect of how we're working with many companies. There's some other examples around we call new insights. So think about the capabilities that kind of omni-channel identity resolution enables. As an example, think about if you're doing a direct mailing piece, sending a catalog, sending a promotion via direct mail. Wouldn't it be great to be able to say, great, I sent a direct mail piece. How many of those, or who received the direct mail, but then actually engaged on the website, whether they logged in and authenticated or not? The things around media open rates, right? Omni-channel measurement, connecting the professional and personal identities. So there's increased scale and the ability to recognize and reach consumers. Those are just kind of some snapshots. I'll get into a little bit more detail in the next slide. We talked about improved measurement. And if you think about taking a previously siloed and channel-based view of measurement. So for those of you who've engaged in, let's say, some kind of digital advertising, as well as email marketing and direct mail, what happens generally is if you take the sum of all the attributed channel-based conversions, right? So how many conversions do I think I got from sending, an email? And how many conversions do I think I get from, digital advertising? And how many conversions did I get from, some kind of direct mail? What often happens is then some of those numbers just don't look right, because what each channel claims as attributed conversions is oftentimes greater than the sum of all sales or something like that. So it just doesn't make sense. So the ability to have a persistent identifier across time, so you can understand person X received a direct mail, they engaged with the website and added something to cart. The cart 2 days later, they called the call center to get some, questions answered by, customer service. They engaged with the brand on Twitter, for example, or basically received a digital advertising message. To be able to trace all those touch points to a persistent ID, that's the foundation of providing improved measurement. You talked about, we talked also about the ability to extend identification, right? So to take anonymous website traffic and be able to say, okay, great, anonymous visitors hitting the website. Do I have a relationship with that visitor? And there are really a couple ways to do that. So one is if I can tie that website visitor that hasn't logged in, if I can tie that website visitor to my existing customer or prospect file, all of a sudden the ability to bring to bear all the information that you know about that consumer across all different touch points, that provides real benefit. And if that that person that visits the website is not already in the CRM file as a prospect or a customer, the ability to maintain a persistent connection to that person to say, hey, this person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they hit the website 3 different times this week and they looked at this type of content or this type of product, this type of service. Now I need to present them with kind of the next logical message that's going to help convert them or push them down the funnel. So the ability to enrich and activate anonymous website traffic is an area where we're seeing a lot of interest. The next page. So if we think about, there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years around personalization and real-time personalization. If you think about something like whatever Adobe Experience Platform or some kind of content management system, I talked about that in terms of the orchestration layer. If this, present that. If it's a customer, present this content. If it's a prospect, present that content. Well, identity resolution can really amplify and put personalization efforts, pour fuel on the fire for personalization efforts. So if you can do a better job of identifying and recognizing a person over time as they choose to engage with the website, those incremental benefits around the incremental recognition can do a better job, even if it's quote unquote more simple personalization, is like if it's a customer, present this, if it's a prospect, present that. There's also we're working with a number of brands around this concept of private identity sharing. So to be able to take a classic example is a retailer and a manufacturer. As a retailer, you probably don't want to give up all your customer information to a manufacturer, but what happens is if you want to be able to figure out how to utilize that information for things like co-marketing dollars or market development funds, the ability to anonymize that customer information and stand up in what we call a private identity cloud. Think about it as a Venn diagram. This is my customer information from the retailer side that's anonymized. Maybe it's customer information from a manufacturer that's anonymized. Be able to provide a flag that says, hey, these customers are actually shared. Right? This customer information is shared between the retailer and the manufacturer. How do you share that information to make those investments actually more powerful? The next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about publisher use cases for identity resolution, right? And the linchpin here is all around increasing the value of media inventory through bringing in incremental addressability and targeting. So if you're a publisher, you probably have some great information on your direct mail site. You mail a magazine or something, probably some great information on those customers. Probably have some great information on customers that actually engage with you and choose to log in, because you can tie all your different identifiers together. Now, what happens for those website visitors who don't log in? Well, you're probably trying to make guesses around, are they my existing customers that I'm sending catalogs to or magazines to? Are they not? All of a sudden, the siloed information is creating a challenge. Well, to be able to take the non-authenticated website visitors, tie that to the actual customer file, increases the value of that inventory, right? So increases the value of that inventory because you can better identify, recognize, and understand the website visitor, right? So we're working with a number of different publishers to connect the CRM file to different touch points, be it a mobile advertising, mobile visit, engagement mobile application, or website visit. Next page. We often engage in conversations, and I think what we wanted to do is try to leave everyone here with some concrete next steps. And we think about it in terms of crawl, walk, run continuum of benefits. So if we think about it from a crawl perspective, what we firmly believe is from a crawl perspective, the starting point is to unify fragmented customer and prospect data across the enterprise, right? So if we think about the graph on the right-hand side here, this is a real example that's been anonymized from a customer that we recently worked with. So this customer had a known customer file, people who've transacted and engaged with them, and a prospect file, people who've provided some information but have not transacted. And if we think about what the starting point was, the customer came to us and said, I have 153 million customer records, and it breaks down to 46 million customers and 107 million prospects. So what we did is we unified that information for each identifier assigned a persistent person ID. And if you jump all the way down to the bottom, it's actually not 153 million customers, it's 96 million customers. And furthermore, 15 million of those records existed both in the customer file and the prospect file. So what's happening is their existing customers are getting messages like a prospect. And I don't want to pick on any company here, but I think we can all use this as a real example. So I've been a customer of Xfinity for a long time, spend thousands of dollars a year with them, and almost every week I get a direct mail piece that offers me a better deal than I'm already getting, right? That's a real example of how this 15 million, customers that actually are in the prospect file, like that just creates a terrible, terrible customer experience. So the first thing to do is to unify the fragmented customer and prospect data, so you can understand if there's a there as it relates to identity resolution. And it's not just taking customer records as an input and unifying them, but it's also around providing incremental opportunities to reach those customers. So in this example, we took in 153 million customer records, so there's 96 million people, but we also provided 566 million additional touch points, so additional hashed emails, additional mobile advertising IDs, which creates additional opportunities to connect, reach, and engage with those 96 million customers. The next slide, please. So if we think about the crawl around saying, let me unify fragmented customer and prospect information, the next part is, great, what do you do with it? How do you engage customers in a way that's more meaningful as a result of identity resolution? We think about the next stage in terms of walk, which is real-time integration across the customer storage and collection layers, right? So from the moment, if I'm a customer and or prospect for that matter, and I join an email newsletter or sign up for a promotion or coupon, the moment that email address is provided, to be able to take that in real time and say, is this new email address, does this belong to an existing customer or prospect, or is it a net new customer or prospect? So this real-time integration around different consumer touch points at the point in which they're gathered and stored is around the walk stage. And if we think about the chart on the right-hand side here, the funnel on the right-hand side here, this is also a real example where we were helping to identify anonymous website visitors. So in this case, over this period, there were 3.2 million anonymous website visitors. These people did not log in. And what we did is we matched about 60% of those, so about 1.9 million visits. And that came from about 600,000 unique people. And then we were able to tie those 600,000 unique people to customers versus prospects. And we found that 72% of the visitors were actually customers and 28% of the visitors were actually prospects. And then we provided 4.2 million additional digital identifiers to provide more opportunities to reach those visitors and message them in the right way, whether they're a customer or whether they're a prospect. So incremental recognition at the moment in which the consumer or prospect chooses to interact is what we think about in terms of the walk stage. And the next slide. So the run stage is really around plugging into the orchestration layer, right? So integrating across the marketing technology stack, particularly as it relates to things like personalization. So to be able to tie incremental benefits of identity resolution to make things like website personalization more impactful, to make it more relevant. I talked about the concept of private identity sharing, right? So to provide this connection and enable identity resolution to amplify investments in personalization and actually orchestration in general. Next slide, please. So I know we've gone through a lot of different things in this discussion so far. What we wanted to do is, frame up an opportunity for everyone here to understand what is the opportunity identity resolution means for me, right? How do I know there's a there if I'm sitting in the audience? And what we can offer here is a free proof of concept. And what does that mean? That means around the crawl and walk stage. So on the left-hand side, it's that funnel that we talked about around resolving fragmented customer and prospect records. So to gather all the customer and prospect identifiers, mobile advertising IDs, email addresses, hashed email addresses, names and addresses, those different identifiers that are across your marketing technology stack, be able to ingest those customer records and show and prove, okay, here's how many unique people that all these identifiers belong to, and here's how many incremental touch points that we can provide. We're offering to do that as a free proof of concept. We can also extend that in terms of recognizing anonymous website visitors over a period of time. So by providing essentially just some JavaScript tag that's embedded on the website, when a website receives a visit, to be able to take that anonymous visitor, assign unique, persistent omnichannel ID that can then be related back to the resolved customer or prospect file. Say, is this a known customer? Is this a known prospect? Or is this a net new person? And quantify, the incremental benefits over time. So that's thinking back in terms of the walk stage. So we're offering a free proof of concept for the crawl and for the walk stage to prove that there's value in identity resolution. Next slide. So Karen, I'll turn it over to you to talk about some key takeaways and summarize the discussion.
Great. Yeah, I was so busy listening to you, Kurt. It's some great information. So audience, there's a lot of takeaways. We've gone through a lot of information and we tried to distill it down into these 5. And I'm just going to go through them quickly because I know we want to try to have some time for some of your questions. So 1, identity resolution is a new marketing capability. It's not a replacement for existing marketing and stack technologies, and ad technology stacks, excuse me. What we've tried to show you today is that identity resolution is going to make your marketing and ad stack more effective. It's going to make everything more effective because you're going to be more relevant with your messaging for your customers and your prospects. 2, identity resolution accelerates marketing investments, low incremental costs to get started. And as I showed you earlier, you get a lot of bang for the buck. It's a invest in technology that doesn't take a lot to get started, but can pay dividends, as Kurt has been going through some of these use cases that you can see the proof is in the pudding. 3, identity resolution improves customer engagement and other use cases. Well, that goes along with what we've been saying, that when you get a better message, when you get a more relevant message, when you can recognize that person that's on your website or calling your call center, they're going to engage with you more because you're speaking to them in about their needs and in ways that are authentic for those customers. 4, an identity resolution solution should be easy to implement and scale with your business. We've talked about the different choices that are out there in terms of identity resolution providers. It should be easy and it should be able to grow with your business as you get better and more sophisticated in your identity efforts. And 5, prove the value before investing with a free proof of concept. Kurt has showed you what FullContact is willing to do. If they may be the right partner, if not, any potential identity resolution partner should be willing to prove to you that they can do some matching and that they can improve your return on your marketing investment. So, those are sort of the 5 key takeaways that we wanted to get across to you on top of everything else we've been saying. So we are hoping to have a few minutes to take your questions. I'm going to take my screen share off so we can see some of those questions and get how much time we actually have left. So,
okay, so we received a number of different questions. Not sure we'll be able to get through everything in the last kind of 4 minutes or so, or 5 minutes, but we'll try. So let's see. The first question I see is, how does FullContact use a client's data? Is the data added to the FullContact graph? So this is an important question that I think anybody that's interested or engaging an identity resolution provider should understand. So FullContact, we believe our client's data is our client's data. They should have control of that. The data does not enter our graph. In order for us to provide the service, so I'll give you an example. If there's an identifier that is a name and address, or an identifier that our customer has that is an email address, for us to provide our identity resolution services, we need to have that name and address, or have that email address, have that identifier in our graph already. So we never use our customers' information, our customers' identifiers, for anything beyond linking to our graph and providing the results of our identity resolution back to our customer. Does not enter our walls. We never touch it. We stand up what we call a private identity cloud that's encrypted and secured and obfuscated. And our customers' data is our customers' data. So I think it's a really important question that everybody should think about as it relates to engaging with any other identity resolution provider. Let's see. There's another question that came up. What links outside of cookies and maids does FullContact use? Example, IP address, hashed email addresses, etc. So we use a number of different links or identifiers that we can resolve. So I'll give you an example. I might not hit all of them, but on the physical side, it's name and address, phone numbers, whether it's a personal phone, professional phone number, business address, personal address, email addresses, mobile advertising IDs, anonymous website visits, Twitter handles, LinkedIn handles. I feel like I'm forgetting a couple of things, but essentially it includes both physical and digital, and our ability to tie those different identifiers to unique individual. Let's see, another question is a hashed email a good persistent identifier? So I don't know, Karen, I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
No, keep going. You're doing great.
All right.
If I have anything to add, I will, but you're doing great.
So a hashed email is an identifier that I believe is an important thing to be able to maintain connection to. So if you think about persistency of different identifiers, one hand you have things like a website visit or a cookie, not very persistent. The other side you have something like a name and physical address. People tend not to change their name very often or move very often. But at the end of the day, think about a hashed email address. Even a hashed email address in and of itself, there's a couple different versions of a hash for every root email. And I might have 3 or 4 different email addresses that belong to me. Maybe my work email address, maybe my, personal email address, maybe a garbage email address where I sign up for things. So a hashed email address in and of itself, I don't believe is sufficient, but the ability to take those hashed email addresses, tie those hashed email addresses together to one person, and then further tie all those hashed email addresses to different identifiers as well. I think that's really what identity resolution is about. Any single identifier is not sufficient to maintain a connection, a persistent connection to a person over time. Let's see. Gosh, another question about FullContact. Is FullContact deterministic or probabilistic? It's so funny. So a number of different years ago, when cross-device advertising capabilities first came about, the whole kind of crux of that conversation is deterministic or probabilistic. And it was deterministic is great, probabilistic is terrible and gives you a higher scale. I'm dramatically simplifying it, but I think what's really important is deterministic does not mean right. So let me give you an example. I might use my wife's email address to log into a mobile application, right? It's directly observed, provided from the consumer, but it doesn't mean it's right. So the short answer is, for FullContact, we are all deterministic, directly observed information, but the value of our graph is we see billions of signals every day, And each signal is a positive indication or negative indication around the validity of those direct observations, okay? So deterministic doesn't mean it's right. Deterministic is a signal that needs to be evaluated based on many other signals to provide, you know, an assessment of whether that that identifier A is linked to identifier B. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Kirk, I think we're going to wrap it up there, but as you said, and the technology has gotten so much better. The algorithms are so much better that when you're talking about probabilistic, it's a lot more. I mean, you're using artificial intelligence in a lot of these platforms. It just, the technology's better. So you can't say one's good and one's bad. A lot of platforms will use both. And, you know, probabilistic comes in somewhere because like you said, it may not be your actual data, but you may be pulling in signals from somewhere else where there are probabilistic matches going on. So it's all much more accurate than it used to be, and it's changing so fast. So
that's right. Well, I think we're out of time. I really want to thank
Marty, did you want to
Karen,
come
and
back
thank
on,
everybody.
or do you want us to wrap up, or what do we do?
Hey, no, I'm here. Thank you so much, Kurt and Karen. This was a wonderful presentation. I am so excited about all the content you had to share and really thrilled by the number of questions. So thank you to our audience as well for not only joining, but for being so interactive. As I said at the beginning, we'll be following up with you to share the recording as well as the slides. So if you're interested in sort of revisiting any of this content or sharing it with your colleagues, we're excited to pass that along to you. And we just thank you all for joining us here today. Thanks again, and we hope you'll join us for a future event.
Thanks,
Thank you.